Voila.
Are you back home?
Yes, at least for a
Good.
bit. And it's my fault that, well, partially my fault that we're starting late. You're responsible for 10 minutes of delay. I'm responsible for five.
All good, all
Because
good, all good. I'm
because I
happy
have
to
to,
share the burden.
no worries. I have to leave at noon because I'm supposed to go on stage at 12:30, 12:40 or something down in Sunnyvale.
Awesome.
Anyways, let's dive right in. So I'm super interested in like having this thought collaboration around what AI means for the media and entertainment industry and business.
Yeah.
And would love to just get some quick thoughts from you. I can share some quick thoughts and then we can sort of like ping pong back and forth.
Yeah, I mean there's certain aspects of it that I'm fascinated by. Like, I'm obviously fascinated by the speed at which things can be created now. That's more on the like production efficiency, but it's also one of those things where like I imagine someone like a James Cameron who wants to see thousands of versions of a Navi, who wants to see hundreds of, backgrounds and is able to do that at a scale and a speed that is just impossible unless you hire tens of thousands of people. And so this idea that like hyper creativity is enabled by AI, this idea of like hyper experimentation, I'm fascinated by that. I'm also fascinated about this idea of like the infinite never-ending franchise, right? And so when you think about like these giant open world systems that could be created, and yes, I'm being a little bit too future forward when I say this, but I, as a personal fan of many, many franchises, the Zeldas of the world, the Star Treks, the Star Wars of the world, like I would love to dive into it. Like I would love to like jump into an open world environment like you can with Breath of the Wild, but then play the narrative that some really smart game creators created and also just farm for a day and also like create my own storylines and also create my own artwork. And so like this idea of the lean forward, I'm going to actually dive in and immerse and be interactive, but lean back and just be entertained. That modality within these franchises that I love, and I use that both in a kind of capital F franchise where it's these global worlds, these expansive universes, and also lowercase f, which is the actual author that I love. Like, like this relationship that you and I have, it would actually be kind of cool to talk to like virtual Chris for a little while, right? Because like you wouldn't be able to talk to me all the time. I think there's something about that engagement structure that people are going to find really important and valuable. And whether it's fictional and it's a character that I want to talk to, or it's actual real and it's the creator I want to talk to, I'm fascinated about that, right? So like if I start breaking down like all of these modes, it changes the way I think about entertainment because for most of entertainment, it's been a lean back experience, right? Like with some elements of lean in. Until the video game industry came out, there really wasn't that expectation that the audience is doing much more than enjoying themselves, right? Obviously, the video game industry said, "Hey, look, you're actually in control of it. It's literally in your hands. Here's a controller. Go do it, be part of the story, be part of the action, be part of the narrative." And I think AI takes that and says, all right, cool, we can do both of those things now, but in a completely different modality, right? Like the lean in experience can be as lean in as you want. Literally, you're the owner of the world, like a godlike figure. And the lean back experience could be forever. Like that virtual Seinfeld, if you remember that from a couple years ago, like if you were to do that today, it'd be like infinitely better, right? So like these are the things that are percolating in my head when I think about how this industry in particular, and frankly, just like the relationship of human beings to this idea of narrative and storytelling are going to change. So I'm
So
curious how you're thinking about it.
yeah, no, I'm going to react to some of those because I think that you've done a great job of laying out some of the key changes that are coming down the pipe. The first thing, when you talked about James Cameron and hyper creativity, it's the power of this human AI combination, this human AI loop. So it's
Yeah,
not, hey, AI, create this great thing. It's, hey, AI, I have an idea. Give me 1,000 variations. All right, I'm going to push it in this direction. Make it more like
yeah,
this. It's that interactivity back and forth and the ability for AI to instantly respond that makes it so
yeah,
powerful. Whereas in the past, if James Cameron had an idea, he could say it to his team and they would come back in a day or two and look at it. Now we can say it to the AI and see it, basically 10 seconds later, 15 seconds later. And that just increases the pace of creativity so much.
I think, and what's going to be really interesting is for someone of that creative caliber, they're going to be able to realize their vision in the most pure way they possibly could, right? Because like time is always the enemy of creation, right? And every artist says the same thing. Like the work is done because I ran out of time. Right. Like like I had to turn in the book. I had a deadline. I had to, like this kind of stuff. So when I think about the hyper creativity side of it, I actually get kind of like goosebumps about it because I think it's gonna unlock an entire generation of creativity. And I actually think it's gonna make it better.
Yeah.
Right. But it does actually from a tech standpoint. Like if we as technologists take a step back and just think about it, this tool is going to need a whole different skill set. It's going to need
Yes.
this, it's going to need this skill set of orchestration, right? It's going to need everyone to start thinking like conductors of symphonies as opposed to players of individual instruments, right? And so when I think about what's necessary today, which I don't see in our education system, and frankly isn't the way that people are trained in their professional lives, that iteration quality, right? Like James Cameron saying, I want 1,000 versions of a Navi, and being able to then say, oh, I really like the way that color and hand look. I really love the way that that creature looks. But to your point, like rabbit holing down to the essence of what in their like imagination they want to have happen, that skill doesn't exist for everybody just out of the off the shelf.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
there's going to be more of this. Yeah.
This is the notion that in this age of AI, everyone needs to be more like a manager or leader than an
Yeah.
individual contributor. And
Yeah.
historically, most people have gotten the value out of their lives by focusing on being an individual contributor. Now it's going to be different. We're all going to be managers. The other thing that I think is really interesting as I think about the implications of this for the hyper creativity and everything else like that, it's the fact that uh, this has happened before.
Totally.
We had the rise of the internet, which allowed
Yes.
more people to make films. We had
Yes.
the rise of YouTube, which allowed people to distribute those. We had the rise of the smartphone and people's ability to film on a camera instead of a giant camera. All of these things did two things. They made it easier to create content, which
Yes.
meant that we did get more bad content, but we
Yeah.
ultimately got more good content. And our technology has always been able to help us separate the wheat from the chaff, find that good content. And that's why I think we're in a golden age of content because it is easier than ever before for more people to be creators.
100%, man. I mean, and it also gave rise, like, I think about what came before as the rhyming analogies to what should come later, right? And so if you think about what happened in music, where once upon a time you spent 10, 20, 15 years of your life learning an instrument, perfecting that to a point where you can then perform it in front of others. And so just the time to creation and time to creativity, right? Like was so long, and that was true of every creative endeavor. And then along comes MIDI, and along comes GarageBand, and along come these tools that allow a kid in a basement to go and create an entire album, and that kid becomes Owl City, and he becomes one of the biggest stars in the world, right? And that's like true in spades in music, and it's given rise to whole new categories of music, right? Whole new ways in which music is created, frankly, just whole new genres of music, which I think is going to be true for every medium now, right? And so to your point, like it's it is, I think, and maybe we're getting at something that the book itself could talk about. Like, what does hyper creativity mean, right? Like, what is
Yes.
that? Like, how do you become hyper creative, and how can you be hyper creative in every aspect of your life, right? Like, the entertainment industry is a bellwether for it, and I think we can talk in spades about like how the Seth MacFarlanes of the world, if given these tools as a student at RDI at 21 years old, would have just run with it and created 15 versions of Family Guy, right? Um, I think that there's something there that's really interesting to tease out. And then the other side of it, which is as the machine starts learning from us, what's going to be possible. Because what is amazing is like I look at Nana Banana today, and because it's been trained and frankly fine-tuned and even more refined, like it's getting better iteratively, not just because we're making the code better, but because what's coming out of the code is better, right? And so like that recursive process of it working with the humans and becoming a better machine, I am fascinated by what that means then down the road because the infinite franchise idea requires a level of technology that I don't think exists yet, right? Like I don't think like the Seinfeld experiment from 2 years ago was awesome, but as a technologist, right? It's not television, right? It wouldn't have lived on NBC and made any money, but you can imagine the nugget of that 20 years from now being part of our entertainment diet, right? I could imagine coming home, sitting down and saying, I want to watch Star Trek. Yes, I'll watch the new Star Trek that somebody's created for me. I'll probably also watch the Star Trek that some fan created because the tools are so good and they're so good at creation. And we're seeing some fan films now that are unbelievably good, right? And then I'll probably just want the machine to tell me a story too. And the diet will be all of those things. And I think as an industry, we need to figure out a couple of things. We need to figure out what the ground rules of that are, right? Like how do you allow that to foster and be developed? And then we need to figure out what the monetization of that is so that there's an actual industry that exists. Because art always needs commerce, right? Art needs business to survive and vice versa. And so I do think, those two threads are to me the most interesting threads out of all of this.
Yeah, and I love the term hypercreativity, and I love the concept of the infinite franchise. And I think you've done a great job already in what you said of explaining some of the different axes or tensions or parameters of the infinite franchise. And I just want to signpost them for the sake of whoever's transcribing this and
Yeah,
whatever AI is trying to figure this out. The first you pointed out is the exploration versus the narrative, the open world versus the guided journey. And both of those are very valid, right? Your point is there are some times when you're like, I want to go into the open world. And there's sometimes you're like, no, take the wheel. I want to have a guided journey. And we need to have a technology and an art form that allows both of those.
yeah,
The second
yeah,
thing that really takes things to the next level is the concept of interactivity. And this is something where you and I have been around. We remember the various games that we might have played when we were growing up that had the NPCs and the interactions, whether it is an old school game like the Ultimate games from Origin, or
yeah,
whether it was Wing Commander, which is
yeah,
another thing. You have cutscenes, you have all these different elements. And then later on, of course, we have Mass Effect and this evolution of interactivity in video games, with that interactivity then becoming a part of all entertainment, right? Because that's
yeah, man.
part of what's made video games so compelling. It's why they're a dominant entertainment form. It's the interactivity element of it. And the final point, which is similar to exploration and narrative, but not quite, it's a nuanced difference, that lean in versus lean back. There are times you just want to lean back, and there are times you really want to lean in, and you need to be able to shift back and forth between those modes. And we have to recognize that our audience is going to be doing both.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that last point, I think the nuance that people are missing is that they see it as the choice between the two as opposed to the interplay of the two, right? And so like video game industry has been testing this for years, right? Like that's what the cutscenes are. They are the lean back part of my lean in experience. It's just by design, the video game is a lean in experience. And so like I do think that there's something really interesting about riding that wave of not just the emotion arc, but also the activity arc. The when are those moments when someone is leaning in? Why are they leaning in? How are they leaning in? What does it mean? Right. And I think the reason it's broken right now is because we don't know what that language looks like, right? Like you think about those choose your own adventure videos, right? Where those were like the pinnacle of interactive entertainment, where you would watch it on your big screen and you had your remote in your hand and a decision point comes up and you got 10 seconds to decide one way or the other. That's just it's so clunky, right? Because like it comes out of the desire to balance lean in and lean back, but it's not natural in the way that human beings think and
Yeah.
behave. And so what is going to be really amazing is when we're able to experiment our way to the right thing, right? And it's actually like, the good news is we have analogies. Like these giant open world games, right? Like I think about like what Warner Brothers is trying to do with Harry Potter. Like if you were someone who loved Harry Potter, just flying around on the broom in Legacy was incredible, right? Like just flying through it, like seeing Hogwarts, seeing the lake, like going all around the kind of dark woods, like that was just an awesome experience. And I know fans of that game did that for hours, right? 100% valid. But then you're like, okay, cool. What was the story again? You dive back in. And then, like so like that modality I think is going to be the dominant way we think about at least franchises.
Yeah,
But arguably I would say every story. I think that, from now forward we are going to be trained in the same way that like you can't live without this thing in your hand every morning, right? Like we're going to be trained to think about storytelling and interactions and the way that we interact and behave as fluid and dynamic. And they're going to go from every medium and every device and every place we are in the same way that like a kid in college doesn't have a television because the television is their laptop. It's their phone, right? Like they don't think of entertainment as locked into a device in a place at a time. They think of it as something that they both can access whenever they want to and something that is available to them freely, right? And so I actually think that we're about to see that next evolution of that thinking where as I'm watching this next Star Trek movie that I love, if it's in my house and I have that's a really interesting planet. Like my brain may ADD me into some new tangent, and I'm just gonna expect to be able to do it, right? And there'll be other times where like I am immersed and the story's incredible. I'm just gonna sit there for 3 hours and just watch the movie play out, right? And so like there's that modality that I think as creators it's really hard to understand and let go. Like I can imagine someone as meticulous as a James Cameron being like, no, I'm going to tell you the story you need to see. Like I spend a decade of my life crafting this so that when you sit down for 2.5 hours, you're blown away by it and I'm transporting you. Right. And I do think though that there's going to be a place where that same creator is going to have to be comfortable with the Avatar open world game that just came out. And the fact that I can just go run around Pandora forever. And the pieces are there, right? Like the technology's gotten to the point where the experience is pretty great. The storytelling has gotten to the point where it kind of understands those elements. Like it understands the moment where you just, yeah, run around Pandora. I spent all this time imagining this world for you, and I've created a rules around what the world should look like. And the game engine has now created that interpretation. Go for it, right? And so I do think creatives need to get to that place where they're comfortable letting go a little bit of their children, right? Of their babies, these things that are precious and frankly wouldn't exist had they not thought of it in the first place. And then the audience has to be respectful of a creator's wishes. So like there's this new language of I think the relationship between artist and fan, artist and consumer that we're just at the beginning of figuring out. And then as an industry, we lag that, right? Like we don't have the supply chain set up to be able to make money on every point. Like we don't have frankly, like the reason Disney lays off 1,000 people, lays off the entire Marvel visual effects team is because they don't know what's going to come next. All they know is it's got to be nimble and they can't have that person be full time right now. Right? Like the project's going to come, it's going to be redefined. They're going to need a bunch of people that have skills in this industry and can tell stories, but they don't know exactly who and exactly when and exactly how many. So that's kind of where we are is this kind of messy transition while we define what this next medium is. And look, like I have every confidence that we will figure it out in the 5, 10 year arc. I just don't know what it looks like in the 2 year arc.
now one of the things I'm going to throw out there as a theory, maybe
Yeah.
more a thought-provoking theory than one that I can necessarily support, is
Yeah.
that we can see by looking at the oldest technologies, by looking at the pre-computer technologies, some hints of how this would work. So when you
Yeah.
talk about the importance of an immersive, lean in kind of experience, ironically enough, I think that people reading paper books provide some of
Mm.
that, right? A person who is reading a book, their brain is working hard to construct the movie in their mind, to
Oh,
create the thing that's
such a,
happening for them. And then the
yeah.
instant they reach something and it's interesting and they want to double click on it, they don't have to hit pause. They just take a step
Yeah.
back from the
Yeah.
book and think. And now maybe they go online, they go to TV tropes, they go to Google, they go someplace else. But the point is, the book has always been one of the easiest ways to immerse and come out. And it's a narrative that's guided. And yet your brain is doing the work. It's a remarkable thing.
Man, that's such a good point. You know what's interesting is every creative will tell you what's not on the screen is as important as what is, right? Like, and so to your point, like the imagination of a human is boundless, and there's nothing more personal, right? So like, I know everyone's talking about like hyper personalized content and hyper personalized experiences, and the reality to me is, if you make it too hyper personalized, you take away the magic, right? Like the brain, the person has to be able to imagine. But you're I think you're that is something to pull apart. Like this idea that each of us is our own universe, and each of us in our brains crafts what we experience in a way that is everything we say we want to do. It's hyper personalized, it's relevant, it's timely, it's yeah, all the things you talk about in
And we
technology.
want our brains to work. Like entertainment is not about, people have got
Yeah,
this image in their mind of entertainment as passive consumption. That's not what it is at all.
that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah,
Like
like even in those moments where you're being transported to another universe, you're being transported because your brain is imagining yourself in them, right? Like, and so like that, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, man. And actually it is why certain genres spark more than others, right? Like
right.
the ones that are the ones that are inherently spaces where you have to be fantastical,
That's
right?
right.
You have to like force yourself. Or the flip side, the ones that are hyper emotional. It's why
Right.
romance novels are so powerful, right? Like it,
Yes.
right? And so I do think those two modalities are the real ones, right? And so like actually, this is actually something that I think is interesting is what's old is new, and that's true every single time. And so when I think about these hyper complex AAA games, like the Baldur's Gate and how amazing that was, I'm old enough, and we're both old enough to remember that once upon a time, all I needed to do was have a cursor blinking and the question, "What do you do next?" come up. And that was as engaging because I was
Hmm.
fully in it, right? The door opens, the sound creaks, you're imagining it. It's all text-based. There's no visuals, there's nothing. It's as plain vanilla as you could possibly expect it to be. And I do think that there's a world coming where we're going to be able to do these narrative experiences, not what we've done over the last 20 years, which is really focus in on fidelity, right? You think about
Yeah.
like the video game industry. It's been a 20-year journey of
More and more polygons.
right, more and more polygons. It's exactly right, right? And so and like the criticism has been the game's beautiful, but it sucks, right? Like right, and so like I do think that there is this world where ironically, like the LLMs allow us to go back to the simpler universe of text-based, chat-based interaction. And then now you layer in like 11 labs and that idea of gathering around a campfire and having a master storyteller transports you just with the power of their voice and the way that they use it and the intonation. I think like when I think about like audiobooks, the best audiobooks are that, right? Like I think about the ones where the Harry Potters or the Lord of the Rings or the ones where Andy Serkis is reading some of them and voices all the characters. Like those things come alive in a way that no movie does. Because to your point, it's in my mind and it's so powerful and vivid. So I'm actually really excited about not just like everything we talked about, where you are fully immersed into something that is so real and room scale in a way that you couldn't imagine it without technology. But the flip side, which is that technology is so good that it makes all other expressions of it before it even better, right? Like I hit Storybot and it tells me a story at night, and it is incredibly compelling because the emotion in the voice, the tonality, the pacing, the creativity shines through, and I don't need anything else, right? And so like that's where I don't know where in the book we tease this part out, but I do think it is important to say if part one is some idea around what hypercreativity do. Part two, and I don't mean this in linear fashion, but there's a
Right.
part that is thinking about what an infinite franchise is and this interplay between a never-ending narrative, and then there's this part that's really talking about lean in, lean back as a symbiotic, fluid dynamic as opposed to a choice between one or the other,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think this next part, which is the better the technology gets, the better all of the expressions become. because, like radio teleplays once upon a time were the only real medium that people experienced, and they were incredible. Why were they incredible? Because of your mind, right?
War
Like,
of the Worlds, Orson Welles and War of the Worlds, a
dude,
classic example.
yeah, and to your point, like the very first one of those was me reading it in a book, and then even before that, it was me sitting around a campfire with a bard, right? And so like every aspect of that gets better because this technology is getting better. It's not just the futuristic thing, which I do think is true. Like if I imagine the house of the future, I absolutely imagine that we will all have a room in our house that is fully room scale. Every inch of it is a screen. It absolutely is tracking our eyes and our bodies, and it will make us feel like we're wherever we are, right? Like we're walking down the streets of Paris. We're talking to our best friend who is literally right there because the
The
holography.
Project Hail Mary holodeck.
That's what I'm talking about, right? Like I fully expect that to become a part of a house design in the next 20 years, right? But even before we get to the holodeck, this that we're doing,
Yeah.
reading it on a screen, reading it in a book, that's going to get better too. And I do think that the steps to the holodeck mean that everything else gets better. And that's the part that I don't think people are talking about enough because everyone talks about how the future is more polygons, right?
Yeah.
The future is actual like GTA 6. The entire thing we've been talking about for the last 3 years has been how real it's going to look, right? Like how cinematic it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's like cool, but GTA 5 was great not because of that. It was great because like it was the first time you could like truly do anything you wanted, right? And so like I do think we're getting too lost both as technologists and as creatives with how great the next iteration of polygons are, right? Or how great the next iteration of whatever technology enablement is, without giving enough respect to the fact that it makes every audiobook better. It just does, right? It makes every time I chat with a chatbot better, right? And so like it's why character AI is a business at the end of the day, right? It's
One of
why
the most addictive businesses.
that's it, right? And so like that's the other part of it, which is, and I'm not sure what you're thinking about in terms of the things we need to look out for, right? Because the things we need to look out for are going to be that this gets so good that we don't actually allow ourselves to engage with each other in real life, right? And so like I see elements of that, right? Like
Yes.
kids nowadays date less, they're getting together less. They break up over text because in real life face to face is too hard, like the dehumanizing of the human. And so
Right.
so we are going to have to find this other part which I actually want to explore as well. Phygital and what it means for real world experiences to be amplified
Mhm.
by this AI
Right.
experience, right? Like I did Guardians of the Galaxy with my son, and that roller coaster immersion with the visuals is unbelievably good.
Rise of the Resistance over at Disney
Oh,
World. Oh my
unbelievably
God.
good, right? And so I do think that we should give some thought on how a real world experience, how when you and I are together at a concert or we're just together as human beings eating lunch, how these technologies actually enhance that. And what it means from an entertainment lens is somewhat obvious to me in the enhancing of the experience part, right? And it's not second screen, it's actually just an addition to my actual lived experience in that physical space. Like every time I go to the next EDM show or EDC, right? Every time I go to Disneyland or Disney World or any of the new modern theme parks, I'm I'm reminded constantly about the idea that location-based entertainment, the idea of being physically somewhere is its own different medium.
Yeah.
And and the artists that figure out how to make that physical experience enhanced by these technologies are just going to win, right? It's why
Sure.
this sphere, despite everything else, is still remarkable,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. So
Yeah,
I want to draw an analogy of old and new
yeah,
that I want to see if you believe that this is true.
yeah,
So once we start talking about the books, the first thing that comes to the mind for me is Lord of the Rings, and then start thinking about all the things that have spun off from that.
yeah,
In many ways, you can look at the entire world of role playing games as
Yeah.
spinning off from Lord of the Rings. So obviously, Gary
Oh yeah.
Gygax, the creator of Dungeons and Dragons, they fought many legal battles over this, but he was
Yeah.
obviously inspired by Lord of the Rings.
No question. Yeah.
And this notion of role playing games, which have come back with a vengeance recently, um, it's one of the interesting answers to your question of what happens in a world where we have all this technology. Are people going to retreat into themselves? And I think one
Totally.
of the hope spots here is the popularity of role playing games where people gather around a tabletop or even live action role playing. I'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
Where one of the reasons why they haven't been more popular, why they haven't gone more mainstream, is because of all the work that's involved in
I
playing them.
agree.
Everybody who's ever tried to organize a Dungeons and Dragons game knows that the hardest thing is to find someone to be the dungeon master because there's so much work involved. But if AI can help with that, if we can facilitate these experiences, things become very different. And there's a funny analogy that not a lot of people would know about, but I think is apt. I did get a chance to go to the Galactic Star Cruiser experience
Oh,
at
cool. Yeah.
Disney World. Did you happen to do that?
No, I was gonna go and they
And
announced
then they
it.
closed it down.
Oh, yeah.
So, what the Galactic Star Cruiser was a live action role playing game. That's not
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
they framed it. People called it a Star Wars hotel. Not true. It's a live
Yeah.
action role playing game, extremely sophisticated.
Yeah.
And the reason it failed is not because the experience wasn't amazing, because it was. It was that there was a limited number of nut jobs in the world who were willing to pay $6,000 for the
That's it.
experience.
Well, actually, I also think it was a failure of getting people to imagine it, to your point. Like, I am a kid of all things genre, which means I did the D&D in high school and then the LARPing in
We got
college.
to play together at some point.
Dude, we absolutely, by the way, like we should actually get a whole crew of us together and
Yeah,
have a game going.
yeah.
Um, but the thing that is, I think, really fascinating is that I don't know if you ever did Sleep No More in New York. It was kind of the same. It was like
So
three
I'm aware of
stories.
Sleep No More.
Yeah.
I haven't done Sleep No More, but I know Sleep No More.
But it's the same thing, right? And
Yeah,
so like there wasn't a person that I took through that experience who didn't come away with some visceral reaction, mostly good,
yeah,
right? And the reason for that is like it reminds you of what it was like to be a child and playing, right? And it's not that the adult us is incapable of doing that. It's that the adult us has so few ways and outlets to do that
yeah.
that we just don't naturally think of doing it. Right? Like think about the birthday parties where it's like the murder mystery parties that you get invited to, or like the Great Gatsby nights, or really any Halloween party, right?
Right,
Like those are culturally established times when role playing is allowed, right? Or at the very least when cosplaying is allowed.
right.
And so,
And
so
there is a difference, but the two enhance each other, obviously.
but like I would actually make the argument that like the reason live events work for a lot of live events is this idea of role play.
Yeah,
Right. So you go to EDC. You're not wearing your normal everyday clothes to EDC, right? You're wearing the thing you wear to EDC. Like when
right.
when I go to the playa for Burning Man, I'm not showing up in my business suit, right? Like
You're not. That's what
I,
I wore when I went.
yeah, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like this is the thing. Like there are already these universes where we're role playing the fandom, but we're not calling it that.
And
And
can we
so
use technology to make these kinds of experiences more accessible, more
I love this.
affordable, more available to everyone?
I love this, man. I love this idea. And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like the people who've never role played that have somebody guide them through a storytelling experience. Like my one of my favorite recent videos of in that universe is when one of the D20 people walks this action RPG through what it's like to play D&D.
Yeah.
Right? And they're like, "Oh, I've never played D&D." Like, it's like, "Well, do you want to try?" And she literally just like starts telling him a story and just asks him questions, and he reacts, and they craft this world together, and you can see the moment where he understands what role playing is,
Yeah.
right? And so I do think you're onto something, which is this idea that technology allows this world of play to open up for all people in a way that
And
hasn't.
play with other human beings, right?
Yeah,
That is the key. It's not just I'm exploring an empty world where everyone else is an NPC. It is the ability to play with other human beings, to feel that connection
that's
that
right.
I think is, at least right now, still something special.
Oh, I think it's inherently human to connect, right?
Yeah.
And so I do think, as we think about like the unlocks to the individual that these tools create, we're also thinking about the unlocks for a community to come together.
Yeah.
Because I do think that that's real. And I do think
Yes.
to the point, like, you know, maybe it is the role playing angle. Maybe it is the fact that every concert is just better now visually. Every concert is just sonically
The
better.
sphere. Oh my
Right.
God.
Oh, it's awesome, right? As a venue, it's incredible to watch the visuals married to the music, right? And I do think there's something to this idea that we need to also, as an industry, embrace the idea that we are community shepherds,
Yes.
right? And so there are people who live and breathe that, like anyone who works at Imagineering, anyone who works at Disney parks, like that is their job, right? Their job is to create this magical universe that is not real but is real, right? And so like I do think there's something magical about that. And I do think the more technology makes us individualistic, which it frankly, let's be honest, that's been 20 years legacy, right? It's been 20 years of us rabbit holing in our own brains and our
Yep.
own selves. I think that now we're at this place where the technology can do the opposite, right? And there are some creators like Brent Bushnell who are out there that are creating like virtual theme parks. There's Chris Cox over at Hasbro that talks about play as a modality, right? So it's not like the industry isn't thinking about this. It's just that we haven't coalesced on the language to start being able to talk to ordinary humans. Right? You walk up to an ordinary human being and say role playing, they're going to be like, I don't know what is that? D&D? I don't do that.
This is a French maid costume. What's happening
Right,
here?
right. I don't do that. Right. Except they do when they go to the concerts they love. Right.
Right.
And if you go up to some normal person and say location-based entertainment, they're gonna be like, what is that? Is that VR? Like, it's like, no, it's actually like anything you do together communally.
Yeah.
It's you being at the park with your friends throwing a frisbee. Right. Like, and so like I do think that there's some element of trying to help the reader in their own way understand that community bond
Mhm.
and start being curious. Right? Like I would love for them to be like, oh, that's true. I've never done it. Well, what if my kid and I today just like tried to play D&D and you go to, Hasbro.com and it's got a dungeon master for you and you start playing and you have this incredible experience with your child, right? Or what if like you and I and a bunch of friends can do it virtually, which by the way is still broken. The idea of
Yeah, the virtual tabletops are not quite good enough.
right, but
We had
still.
to do it during the pandemic because there's no alternative, and you do it
Yes.
because your friends are in different places, but it's still not as good as being there in person.
Yeah, but the tools are there now that they should
Yeah,
become better and better and better, right? And so
yeah,
like, but the reason they're not is because we haven't done enough work as an industry to get the ordinary human being out there to imagine
yeah.
doing it. So I would love for this book to not only just be like a catalyst and exploration of the things that are coming, but a catalyst of getting people to imagine and become curious themselves and say, "Oh, that's really cool. Like I never thought about storytelling that way. Let me download 11 Labs and have it tell me children's book stories to my kids, right? Or let me try AI in a way that I never even thought about trying it before." And then now you've got a milieu where creativity becomes really, really interesting.
No, I agree. I think that this is a great spine. I want to touch on one last topic just because I'm very curious about how you feel about it. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily attach to the rest of this discussion, but I do want to hear about it, which is the shifting of formats and the move towards micro dramas.
Yes.
So I have seen this myself in the sense that, my wife subscribed to something called Drama Box, which I
Yeah.
discovered
Yeah.
according to Sensor Tower,
Yeah.
generated 20 million in revenue in the past 30 days, and it's probably
Yeah.
an underestimate.
Yeah.
We're moving towards this notion of liquid content, of
Yes.
content being available in whatever with us wherever we go, anywhere, and in tiny little chunks. And I'm curious what you think is driving it and where you think it goes.
I think it is the most human of things to get lost in a story, right? And what has changed is two things, the access points and the way in which they transact. So remember when we were all talking about transmedia and how like a story was going to go from a game to a TV show to a movie back to a book and vice versa, and that narrative just kept going. Well, the reason it was so hard to do is because the time frames were too long, right? Like I as a person have 5 or 10 minutes free right
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
right?
That's it. That's you got to give it
Right?
to me right now.
Right. And so I just see microdramas as an additional evolution of the way in which our free time is cut up as people, right? Because like in those moments where I do have an hour, I don't want to. I might choose microdramas, but I will also watch an episode of One Piece, or I will also watch a movie that I love, or I will also dive into a book and read it for an hour, right? And so what I see in microdramas that's amazing is that it has, and by the way, I advise several of these platforms, right? They've been able to take the best of our impulses to dive into something, right?
Yes.
That idea that like it's the serialized book that Charles Dickens used to write. It's the soap operas that
That's
used to
right.
be the generational thing
Just one more.
watched
Just
every
one
day.
more.
Now you're doing it in a span of an arc that is 1 to 3 minutes long, where at the end of it, I can't stop. Right at the end of it, it's literally a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
It's literally teasing the next like narrative thing that I need for that dopamine hit. And so the dark side is it's all the negatives of the microtransaction economy in gaming, it now in TV form, right?
Right.
In content form. The positive side is it's yet another way in which I can tell a complete story and do it to fit a lifestyle that our modern lives are, right? Like
And
if
I
I,
feel like one of the interesting things, and this
yeah,
is the term that I sometimes use,
yeah,
is the narrative density is
oh yeah,
so high because of that. It's similar to,
100%.
this is not the same experience. It's similar like reading something like TV tropes. The narrative density is so high.
Man, that's so good. That's such a good way to think about it, right? Like, it's like for me, it would be the difference between Moby Dick the book and Moby Dick the movie,
Yeah,
right? Where Melville can talk about whale blubber for an entire chapter because you can do that in a book.
exactly.
But in a feature film, if I was watching someone talk about whale blubber for an hour, I would tune out. And so that narrative density point
Yeah,
I think is so good and so
yeah.
clever. I love that. I love that as a frame. Like microdramas are like, at least currently, the most narrative dense medium outside of the kind of
Outside of webtoons, outside of comic books, which have to,
correct.
not in a single minute, but in a single strip,
Well, I mean,
have you be
think about our technology universe. Like, what is Instagram if not highly narratively dense,
right.
right?
That's right.
And so what's happened is before there was no way to have narrative density match the free time I had.
Yeah.
I had to make my free time match the narrative
Yes.
density.
Yes, yes, this is great. What we're talking about is content. Instead of us fitting content into our lives, it's content fitting itself into our
That's
lives.
correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
The liquidity of the
I think about
content.
because I do think that's the evolution of
Yeah.
the audience. Like 50 years ago, you had to build your life around the content. I
Yes.
show up at 8 p.m., sit there for a half hour, and love my sitcom.
Yep.
Right? I had to do that. Like if I missed it, I missed it. It was gone. Right? Today, the content fits into my life. Now, what's challenging is understanding as an industry how to be happy with the microdramas as much as we are happy with the 3 hour movie in a movie
Yeah.
theater.
Yeah.
Because we have to be happy with both extremes, right? And
Amazing.
we can't be this industry that's like on the one hand at CinemaCon decrying the fact that movies are not in movie theaters, and on the other hand at the microdrama side saying that all mediums are dead except for microdramas. It's not true on
Right.
either extreme, right?
Yeah.
It's that as a person, my free time is going to be doled out in very different ways. And when I have the moment of free time, it's the industry's job to fit that moment.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. That's the perfect place to end because I got to get going so I can
Yeah,
appear on stage.
love
I
it, man.
will save this. I'll record it. I'll get the transcript. I'll share all those with you, and then we'll figure out what the right next steps are.
I love it, man. This was fun. This is
Amazing.
gonna be a fun book to write, dude. I'm excited about this.
I agree. I mean, again, this is just